Have fun for that big giant disco ball that's probably gonna fall and kill 20 of you.
Alright, hello Maroon 5 fans, hello pop heads, and hello sex addicts. It's your man, the Cozy Representative. I'm back. In my last video, we dove into the world of 2008 Warped Tour neon pop punk and examined one of the many bands from this era who achieved a moderate level of Warped Tour scene success. That band was called Hey Monday. And today we're going to be looking at kind of a similar band. Much like Hey Monday, this was another band whose record label saw potential in them possibly becoming the next chart-topping mainstream emo radio hitmakers like their predecessors Paramore and Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. And it seems like the band themselves were willing to push themselves in that direction as well and genuinely go for it. Genuinely try to achieve crossover success with a big mainstream radio hit. And unfortunately, also much like Hey Monday, that never happened for this band, and we're gonna get into why. This band was similar to Hey Monday in other very distinct ways too, shockingly enough. This band was also signed to Pete Wentz's record label, Decadence Records. This band also released their debut in 2008. This band went on a lot of the same tours. What made this band that we're gonna be talking about today a little different, however, is that even though they came out of the Warped Tour neon pop punk wave or whatever, and were signed to Decadence and played on Warped Tour, musically this band always had way more in common with like Maroon 5 or Justin Timberlake, as opposed to musical common ground with, Fall Out Boy or All Time Low. They were much more of like a pop R&B straight up kind of band. Believe it or not, this band even started opening for huge artists like Avril Lavigne and Maroon 5 towards the end of their career. They co-wrote songs for their second record with people like Bruno Mars and Adam Levine, and an unreleased song of theirs even became a big-time Rush song. Fun fact, we'll get more into that. The band in question, yes, of course, Las Vegas, Nevada's own The Cab. For a minute, it really seemed like The Cab were on a mission to burst out of the emo pop-punk scene and really become the next Maroon 5 or something. But their mission was plagued by numerous lineup changes, label problems, entire scrapped albums, and sometimes maybe a lack of clear direction in the music. Today, we're going to explore all of it and figure out exactly what the hell happened to these emo R&B shooting stars in The Cab. Hello, my name is the Cozy Representative. Come, take my hand, friends, as no pun definitely intended, as we go through all of it. The rise, the fall, the ups and downs, the missteps of The Cab. Let's fucking go. Before we go on, big thank you to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon. If you're interested in seeing bonus content from me and other fun little perks, or if you're just interested in helping out the channel, a little really goes a long way. And once again, a big thank you to everyone who supports this channel over on Patreon. And also, before we get into the video, I did want to say I got a lot of information for this video from one specific podcast, the Alternative Press podcast, yes, the magazine. They have a podcast, and they did an interview with the singer of The Cab back in like 2012 or 2013. This is the episode in question. I got a lot of info. It's a great podcast episode, great interview with the singer. I got a lot of information from it, and I'm using a few clips from that podcast throughout this video. So shout out to Alternative Press and Mike Shea for this wonderful interview, which I got a lot from. So yeah, just wanted to say that. So anyways, let's get into it. The band, The Cab, they formed back in 2004 in Las Vegas, Nevada, and their original story is pretty typical of how most teenage local emo garage bands come together. It started with two high school buddies, Alex DeLeon and Cash Colligan. What a name right there, right? Cash Colligan. Sounds like a emo superhero, neon superhero. They started jamming together on acoustic guitars when they were in high school. Funny story that the singer told in that AP podcast interview. Apparently at first, Cash Colligan was going to sing lead vocals and Alex was just going to play guitar, until one day they were driving around together and they were listening to Fall Out Boy, and they were listening to the song The Music or the Misery, which is a B-side from Under the Cork Tree. Great fucking song, by the way. Some of my favorite Pete Wentz lyrics. I don't know why the hell that wasn't on From Under the Cork Tree. Great song. But anyways, yeah, Alex DeLeon started singing along to this song, just kind of on a whim, just having fun in the car, and apparently Cash was so impressed by Alex's undiscovered vocal talent that he grabbed Alex by his shirt and said, "You can sing? You're the lead singer now of the band. You have to be. You gotta sing." And that was that. And since then, Alex DeLeon was the lead singer of The Cab, and Cash Colligan ended up picking up the bass. They then rounded up the lineup with some local music friends who they recruited. The original lineup of The Cab included Alex Johnson on drums, Alex Marshall on piano, and Paul Garcia on lead guitar. And of course, Alex on vocals and Cash on bass. The Cab, there you go. So, on the internet, it's actually kind of hard to find, like, information about the early OG The Cab, like, before they got signed to Decadence. There's a lot of sources which say that The Cab have a debut EP called Drunk Love. Once again, in that AP podcast interview, Alex DeLeon. Also, I just want to say, I'm pretty sure his last name is pronounced DeLeon, or DeLeon. I don't know. I've never really known how to pronounce it over the years. I at one point thought it was Dillian, which I realize now is totally butchering his last name. But DeLeon, we'll just call him Alex, or the singer. Anyways, he clarifies that in that interview that the Drunk Love EP wasn't an official release. It was more of just like a group of early demos that went up on their MySpace page when they first started. So it's not like an official release. Regardless, here's a clip from one of those early The Cab songs with a title that I really like. It's called "You Can't Be Arrested for Being High on Heels."
You trade the space just like you should. Little gas to get all that hurts so good. Hope feels like this is stable home. Here's the latest trend. You're all alone. Your words they move. Your lips they tell. With every breath.
So, as you can hear, they pretty much sounded like any average pop-punk local band at this point. There's nothing super remarkable going on. Already, though, early on, singer Alex DeLeon's voice is a big highlight of the music. He has a great tone. He has a great sense of melody right off the bat. You know, it's probably the most attention-grabbing thing about the music was his voice. The band started playing locally, local shows around Vegas quite a bit. They started gaining some local buzz, started fucking going on MySpace and fucking getting numbers on MySpace before releasing their first real EP in 2006, which was called the Glitz and Glamour EP.
So baby, sell your soul into the fashion show. Your heels are clicking to the sound of this cooking scene.
Again, there's not really a whole lot documented about this early era of The Cab. I can't really find any live videos or anything like that, really. The most prominent thing I was able to find was their old MySpace page from the Glitz and Glamour era on the Wayback Machine, which looked like this. Pretty interesting. I don't know, some cool stuff going on there. So the way Alex, the singer, tells the story, in the midst of this era of the band, they came up with two new demo songs after the Glitz and Glamour EP, which I believe they put up on their MySpace. And these songs were called, there was one song called Take My Hand, and there was another song called I'll Run.
And I'll run.
songs is where shit really gets cooking. This is when the Cab fucking like goes from Bruce Banner to the Incredible Hulk, you know what I'm saying? This is when they started to reach that next level musically where they didn't just sound like your average beginner interchangeable local band, you know, but instead they were starting to have songs which were distinctive, accessible, noteworthy sounding. You know, these new songs, for lack of a better word, they were like real songs and showed that the Cab actually had potential for like real widespread commercial success. So, while the Cab were gaining a considerable amount of buzz online and in their local scene off of the Glitz and Glamour EP as well as these new demos, in 2007, early 07, the singer of the Cab, Alex, attended a show.
The story is supposedly that you actually had brought a cassette or a CD or something, it would have been CD, to give to a friend that night.
Well, what happened was we just recorded the songs, Take My Hand and I'll Run. So I burnt them on a CD from my friend. I get in the car, her name's Christina Foti. We get in her SUV, and we're driving to the Cartel, Boys Like Girls, Cobra Starship Acceptance show, maybe? I think Acceptance was on that. It was around that time.
And I Googled that, Bill, and sure enough, Cartel, Cobra Starship, and Boys Like Girls did do a short tour together in February of 2007. There's no Las Vegas date. I'm assuming he maybe attended one of the California dates at the end of the tour anyway. But at the show, he just so happened to run into Spencer Smith and John Walker of the band Panic at the Motherfucking Disco.
I had two CDs with me. I don't know why, but there was two. So she had two CDs in her purse. We go to the venue and watching the show, and I run into Brian at the time from Boys Like Girls, or he was in Boys Like Girls, and he was so nice about it. He was like, "Oh my God, I can't wait to listen to this. Like, thank you so much, man. Like, I appreciate it." Never got back to me. He was the nicer one, so I thought for sure he would listen.
Right.
And then I see Spencer and John, and they're like super nonchalant, and Spencer's like, "Yeah, man, I remember you from our first show. You were like front row." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Cool, dude, thanks." And kind of like didn't blow me off, but was just like, "Yeah, you know, we gotta go," you know. And I was like, there's no way he's listening to it. And it flipped. I guess Brian and I are friends now, so I always mess with him. Like, you had the chance to break us, man, and you just didn't listen. And I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened that night. And I was just cracking up. But Spencer and John listened. And Spencer, I remember he came up to me and he goes, "Dude, we were having a really bad night. And we wanted to listen to your demo. We thought it'd be, because most of them are awful. You know, 99% of the demos you get are pretty bad." So he's like, we just wanted to like laugh at something. So we were going to put it in and be like,
At least they were honest.
We were like, dude, we wanted like a confidence booster. Like, you guys are doing good because there's music like this out there. And he's like, and we put it in, and he's like, we loved it. For whatever reason, we loved it. And we went to Ryan and we showed Ryan, and Ryan was the guy who contacted me.
And he hit you up on MySpace or something, didn't he? Or
On AIM.
On AIM.
Yeah, I was just sitting at home, and he's like, dude, you have one of the best voices I've ever heard. Like, you have no idea the potential. And I'm just like, okay, like, you are insane. Like, I don't even think these songs are that good. And I recorded them. And then he invited us to their cabin, and we went to their cabin, and like little things I remember, like Spencer pulling me to the side, and Spencer put his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "I don't know how long it's going to take." He goes, "I can't promise you anything, but," I mean, he was a little drunk, but he goes, "You guys are going to be so much bigger than Panic one day, than my band." And he goes, "You have no idea." And he goes, "It could take 10 years. He's like, "But there is going to be a point in time to where you guys are going to be way bigger than us, and you're going to call me, and you're going to be like, how the hell did you know?"
Next came an audition for Decadence Records label owner, scene tastemaker, nightclub owner, clothing line runner, author, and Fall Out Boy bassist Pete Wentz at a Gym Class Heroes video shoot. Oh my God, shit's getting real.
So what was that audition for Pete?
No, that was crazy. So it was finals week. It was the last week of school. I was studying for like a calculus final, and
Of course.
I get a call, and I think it was from Jonathan Daniel, who, you know, was with Crush Management, who Panic introduced us to. And he goes, "Hey, Pete's in town, doing a Gym Class Heroes music video at the Palms. Bring a guitar. You have an audition in an hour." In an hour? You know, I live 40 minutes away, so you're telling me I got to get dressed and just go? And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." So I get there, and the gym class was for clothes off. So there was girls, there was like supermodels in bikinis, like walking down the hallways and cameras. And I'm just like, what the fuck's going on? This is insane. Pete's in an Elvis outfit because he was Elvis in the video. So like, it was just so odd. And he sat us in a circle. I remember like Sashi and Travi were all like changing like right next to us. And we're like in this massive circle, and it's like Ashley Simpson, Pete, everyone from Crush, like some of the gym class dudes. It was just everyone. And I sat down, and he handed me, or he's like, pick up your guitar. And like I said, I'm not a guitar player. And he's like, I want you to play and sing. And I was just like, no way. I'm like, what do you want me to play? And he goes, whatever you want. And I'm like, okay. And I played, I think 2 songs just song ideas that I had, not songs that ever became anything. Actually, Lights. I played Lights, which was a B-side from Whisper War. I played Lights, and I think I played a little bit of Take My Hand, maybe. And after like 3 minutes, he's like, all right, sign him up. And he patted me on the back. He's like, have a great night. And he was just like, I'm like, that's it? He's like, yeah, welcome to the family. And I'm just like, awesome. And I remember we got the contract in the mail a few days later and signed it on my kitchen counter, and I was just tripping out.
So there you have it. Just like that, a local band from Las Vegas with a couple promising demo songs were now signed to pretty much the biggest label in the scene, Decadence and Fueled by Ramen. Crazy, it's nuts. So, just to give a little story time real quick, a little bit about my own personal perspective, because, as you guys know, I was a big fan of Fueled by Ramen records at this time. Huge Fall Out Boy fan, Panic, Cobra, Academy, all those bands were like my favorite bands. Anything on Fueled by Ramen, any album that came out on that label, I bought it, regardless of even knowing what the band was. I just was a huge Fueled by Ramen fanboy. And I remember the Cab started to be promoted by Fueled by Ramen around fall of 2007, and I specifically remember attending the Young Wild Things tour around that time, which was Fall Out Boy headlining. Openers were Plain White T's, Gym Class, and Cute Is What We Aim For. I distinctly remember at that show, it was in an arena, right? And there were these big jumbotrons. And in between bands, Cobra Starship, who were not playing at the show, but were on, Decadence, Cobra Starship would show up on these jumbotrons, and there were like skits of them doing goofy shit. Anyone out there who went to the Young Wild Things store, do you remember that? Do you remember Cobra Starship up on the jumbotrons? It was sick. Anyways, in one of their little jumbotron segments, I remember Cobra Starship promoting the newest Decadence Records signee, The Cab, and they were also promoting the first single by The Cab, the first song they released through Fueled by Ramen and Decadence, which was the song All Run. And it was actually a demo. It was the demo version of All Run, actually. They hadn't done their album yet. It was just like that demo. There was a little home video for it, which Fueled by Ramen put out, and they were promoting the All Run demo, which is pretty cool. Anyways, so that's where the Cab first entered my personal lexicon in fall of 2007 at the Fall Out Boy show with Cobra Starship on the jumbotrons telling me about it. Following this, I'm assuming late 2007 was when the Cab went into the studio to record their debut record. Also around this time, the Cab parted ways with their original guitar player Paul Garcia, and they linked up with a friend of the band named Ian Crawford, who was a guy from Seattle who I believe moved down to Vegas to join the Cab, and Ian Crawford was an absolute, step up for the band. Insanely incredible guitar player, like virtuoso whiz kid lead guitar player, and he just really added a lot to the Cab sound and elevated it, and put a cool, like, real classic rock element into their sound at the time. They went from that, recording their first album, straight into hitting the road on tour. In early 2008, they went on their first big tour, called the Really, Really Ridiculously Good-Looking Tour, headlined by the band on the Jumbotron from that Fall Out Boy show that I went to, Cobra Starship, and the Cab were performing alongside fellow opening acts Metro Station and We the Kings. Man, what a bill. Following that, in spring of 2008, the Cab went out on their second tour called the Long Hair Don't Care Tour, headlined by We the Kings with fellow opening acts Valencia and Charlotte Sometimes. And around that time, just after their second ever tour, the Cab's debut record entitled Whisper War was officially released on April 29th of 2008 through Fueled by Ramen and Decadence Records. This record was produced by a man named Matt Squire, who was pretty much like one of the go-to producers in the scene at the time. If you were like a Warped Tour pop rock band, he did the first Panic at the Disco record, he did the first Cute Is What We Aim For record, he did the Boys Like Girls record, he did the All Time Low record, he did the Main record, he did fucking everything. Anyways, what ended up resulting on the Cab's debut record, Whisper War, was pretty much the musical middle ground between Fall Out Boy's Infinity on High and Maroon 5's Songs About Jane, as well as a few scoops of Justin Timberlake's Future Sex love sounds in there as well, for good measure.
You don't stand a chance, girl. You'll fall apart, stop talking with your hands, girl.
Overall, it has the guitar tones, the big chorus melodies, and the overall, youthful urgency vibe of a 2000s emo pop rock record, but ultimately, like I've said, it has way more in common with Maroon 5 or Justin Timberlake or even like fucking Usher than it has in common with Fall Out Boy. And it has nothing in common with like New Found Glory, you know what I mean? It was straight up an emo R&B record. It was a pop rock R&B album, essentially. It's interesting, there was a whole tiny subculture of these sort of emo R&B records coming out around 2007 and 2008. Obviously, Patrick Stump was pushing his vocals in Fall Out Boy to a more soulful R&B tone at the time. You had The Cab coming out, but you also had records like Champion by The Audition, or Used and Abused by Danger Radio, or On Fire by The Higher, all great records, by the way, and all these bands were really pushing the Justin Timberlake meets Fall Out Boy agenda. And that's a very interesting little subculture of Warped Tour that I definitely want to talk about more in the future, because I feel like not a lot of people talk about those like funky R&B Warped Tour emo bands or whatever, but the Cab definitely rose to the forefront of the emo R&B movement. It really wasn't a movement, it was just like a handful of records that came out around that time, but Whisper War by the Cab was definitely the biggest one in the scene at the time. They benefited from being on Decadence and, having that Pete Wentz co-sign, but they also benefited from simply having just really great songs on this record, I think. The bigger singles on this album, like Bounce or All Run, really do sound like they could be giant radio hits. Like they fulfill that mysterious pop criteria which a hit song requires, They're accessible, they're big, they're very, I don't know, just next level. They're really good. A song like Take My Hand is just about as good as any of the other big emo bands at the time, and songs like High Hopes and Velvet Ropes, Risky Business, or Zzz, the Sleep song, show the Cab really embracing their niche of R&B emo and comfortably delivering unique, incredibly solid, soulful pop rock songs. A couple interesting moments on this album which show that the Cab really knew what they were doing and meant business. A song like That 70s Song, for example, had a real Jackson 5 kind of vibe.
Baby, we will not alone. Alone. Da 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 da.
And the track I'm a Wonder, the one that, that was produced by Patrick Stump, feels, I don't know if the title is poking at this, but it feels a lot like a Stevie Wonder jam. These moments on the record where they throw it back to classic 70s soul and R&B influence is a really cool aspect of this band. Like I said, it showed that they were super talented and they were bringing something unique to the emo world at the time. Not a lot of other bands in that wave could be like, hey, here's a song that sounds like fucking Jackson 5 and like actually have it work, Takes a lot of talent to do that. One of the most noteworthy songs on the album to me is the opening track, One of Those Nights. Not only does this song feature guest vocals from both Patrick Stump and Brendan Urie, which is almost like Fueled by Ramen guest vocal overload. It's like, you really didn't have to have both of them on there, but I guess it's cool. But it's an incredibly hype, driving, like urgently catchy song. You know, this song is one of the highlights of the Fueled by Ramen wave in general at the time for me. Like if I put together like 12 of just the best songs that came out on Fueled by Ramen from like 07, 08, one of those nights is fucking up there. It's a great one. So when Whisper War by The Cab was released back in 2008, it really started blowing up in like the neon Fueled by Ramen emo pop corner of the Warped Tour scene at the time. They got pretty big pretty quick. Girls loved it. It's like an incredibly horny album, you know? It sounds super horny. It's like real fucking sex music, you know? It's a super Chad album. I really enjoy the diverse array of genres and style blending on this album, Whisper War by The Cab. I think, you know, that was part of what made them unique and special and rise within the scene. However, looking back, I do kind of think that the push and pull between genres on this record, the fact that it's not quite an emo pop punk record, not quite an R&B pop record, and not quite a rock record, but instead some sort of Frankenstein mix of all three, may have worked well in terms of successfully making The Cab a great opening act for Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco, but it may have worked against them in terms of making this record have a real crossover appeal in the mainstream music world, like the band or the label Fueled by Ramen may have wanted or even may have predicted for them, but we're going to peel back that onion a little bit more in a little bit. Anyways, The Cab hit the road touring extremely hard in support of Whisper War throughout 08, 09, and 010. Like, seriously, this band toured their fucking asses off. They were on every single tour at the time. So the non-stop string of tours they were on following the release of Whisper War were as follows. Summer 2008, the Dance Across the Country tour. The Hush Sound, The Cab, Steel Train, and The Morning Light. I attended this tour. It was fucking awesome. Love all these bands. Steel Train, that's Jack Antonoff. He's he writes with fucking Taylor Swift and Lorde now. Yeah, he was in the band Steel Train. Fall of 2008, the Why So Serious tour. Oh shit, this is the first headlining tour by The Cab. Much like Hey Monday in my last video, the like third or fourth tour that both of these bands did were their first headlining tour. That is rare. That is hard to do for a band. Usually bands have to tour for years before they headline, but fall of 2008, The Cab were already headlining. Opening up for them were This Providence, A Rocket to the Moon, and Hey Monday. Boom, there you go. End of 2008, again, kind of a smaller tour for them. The Rock Band Live tour with Panic at the Disco, Dashboard Confessional, and the Plain White Tees. Just a little arena tour to cap off their first year of touring. Nothing crazy. Early 2009, they went on the Hello, My Name Is tour with The Academy Is, and this was a different kind of tour. It was not your average tour, but it was a tour of acoustic Hot Topic in-store performances, and they would actually, The Academy Is and The Cab members would sit next to each other in the Hot Topic and trade off songs back and forth. There's a lot of funny footage on YouTube of that.
You're welcome. Hey, everyone, give it up for The Academy Is, please.
No, my camera turned off.
Adam, why are you over there?
Yeah, come over here. You can come sit with us. You can sit. Yeah, come sit.
And because we like to help out friends, like The Academy Is, we're getting really close with them, and we have another friend here today, and he's only going to be here with a few days for us. But have any of you guys heard of a band called The Rocket to the Moon?
Yes.
Nick is right over there, the singer. He's really great.
I didn't even realize.
Right after that, early 09, the Secret Valentine Tour opening for We the Kings once again. Also on this bill were The Maine, There for Tomorrow, and Versa Emerge. Spring of 2009, the Bamboozle Roadshow. I did attend this one, the Bamboozle Roadshow, and it was sick. We the Kings headlining Forever the Sickest Kids, The Cab, Never Shout Never, and Mercy Mercedes. That shit was legit. They finished off 2009 with a summer tour, their second headlining tour called the What Happens in Vegas Tour, and this was a big run featuring a ton of opening acts like The Secret Handshake, A Rocket to the Moon, The Somerset, I Alaska, My Favorite Highway, and Ann Arbor. That's a lot of fucking bands. As a companion piece to this tour, The Cab released an EP called the Lady Luck EP. This is one of those EPs where it's not really like a cohesive thought out like body of work, you know, but more of like just a promotional EP featuring a mishmash, a hodgepodge of songs, if you will. There's a dance remix of their single Take My Hand, which features Cassidy Pope from Hey Monday on it. There's an acoustic version of All Run. There's a cover of I Want to Break Free for some reason. There are 3 new previously unreleased The Cab songs on here though, my favorite of which being I Am Who I Am, very hype, catchy R&B pop rock track.
When you sing a song, baby, I am who I am. You know I'm there that you take it to, and I am who I am.
So, although The Cab were, you know, on paper fucking murdering the game around this point in mid-2009, much like around the same point in Hey Monday's career, again, you see, they covered Hey Monday last time, the career trajectory is very similar. Much like Hey Monday, The Cab started facing some challenges in the form of lineup changes. In early 2009, their lead guitarist Ian Crawford left the band, citing musical differences. He wanted to do something different, and that, I feel like, was a pretty big loss for The Cab. You know, Ian Crawford, like I was saying earlier, was an incredibly talented guitar player. He really added a lot to the band. He could shred. Also, that dude, Ian Crawford, has gone on to pretty much be the go-to fill-in live member for, like, every Decadence band and more since leaving The Cab. He was, right after he left The Cab, he was in Panic at the Disco for a little bit. He's currently playing for The Academy Is. He even had a brief stint in Never Shout Never, which is kind of funny. And yeah, so he left, and then after the What Happens in Vegas tour in summer of 09, their bass player and co-founder, Cash Colligan, the dude with the cool name, he left the band too. So him leaving, you know, I don't think it's a super big loss in the musical department. He could play the bass, but he wasn't like, you know, but he was kind of, I feel like he was a big loss in terms of the personality of the band, because based on interviews I've watched and the vibe I kind of get, it seems like that's kind of what Cash was to The Cab in the early days. He was like the personality guy, the funny guy, the outgoing spokesman of the band, if you will. Very Pete Wentzian in a way. So his absence from the band, losing the funny, personable personality guy, as well as losing lead guitar virtuoso Ian Crawford, I think was a big unfortunate circumstance for The Cab. But at the time, it seemed like they were willing to push forward, and after that tour in the summer of 09, begin work on a second record.
So 4 years later, and within a few months from now, I'll be 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on that record, is there anything you kind of feel like now, with some retrospect, you can sit there and go, we probably could have done that better? Anything like that?
Of course. I mean, looking at that album, even thinking about the experience, we were so green, like I said earlier, that we were so excited to be in a big studio with like a big soundboard, and there was an Xbox in the next room, and we were at the Red Bull Studios, and we're like, this is amazing, like, we've made it. We were just so excited that, you know, I think we let everyone else steer the ship. And maybe that's the one regret that I have for that first album is, like, I really wish that I would have been a little more vocal, you know, instead of just trusting everyone, instead of being like, oh, you know, they did this and they've done this, so they must know what's right. You know, it's really, I really wish I would have just put my hand in it and been like, no, like, we should do this and we should do that. And that was the problem with our first record, is just being brutally honest. There were so many cooks in the kitchen, from management and the label and the producers and the writers and us, that Whisper was a hard album to make. Everyone was fighting with each other on, like, we were supposed to be the next big band. You know, we had Panic and Fall Out Boy on our record on the same song, and Fall Out Boy had just blown Panic up, and we were Panic's band. So it was like, naturally, people expected us to blow up. So when we didn't, it was like, who do we point, like, let's point fingers. Whose fault is this? We were supposed to be the biggest band in the world, and we're not. Everyone wanted the album their way, and no one got it their way. It just kind of was this mush in the middle. You know, still an album that we're very proud of, but it was so chaotic. And looking back on it, we thought it was normal back then, but it's really not. You know, it shouldn't be that intense. It shouldn't be that crazy, and it shouldn't be that political. And Whisper War was a very political record.
So, launching into 2010, I put on a flannel because I got cold. The era of the Cab's upcoming second album seemed promising at first. In spring of 2010, the Cab headed out on a big tour, the Alternative Press Tour, headlined by Never Shout Never alongside fellow openers Hey Monday, Every Avenue, and the Somerset, another tour that I attended as a young one. And after that, it was off to a full stint on the 2010 Warp Tour. Big stuff. First Warp Tour for the Cab. And also during this time, although the Cab did have a couple new dudes as a part of the lineup playing bass and lead guitar, it seems that those were only session players at the time, as the Cab in 2010 was only being marketed as the three remaining original dudes from the band. Ironically enough, three dudes named Alex: singer Alex DeLeon, pianist and guitarist Alex Marshall, and drummer Alex Johnson. Alex squared, if you will.
Working with your hands, girl. Working with your hands, girl.
You guys are recording a new album, correct? Correct, we are. We actually finished recording. There you go. All the instruments are all done, all vocals are all done. We're just waiting to get mixed and mastered.
Alright, so on Twitter you said that like the new album's gonna be called Sympathy Soldiers.
What can fans expect from the new album?
It's definitely still us. We didn't really hold back, so the stuff that was kind of pop on the first album is very pop on this album. The stuff that was like a little rock on the first album is like a lot of rock on this one. It was like very dark, edgy songs, and there's, you know, very poppy, like, you know, Michael Jackson type songs.
So the band hops off of Warped Tour 2010, the fire is lit under their ass, they were playing for big crowds, they're due for a second album. Momentum is on the wind is in their sails. So what do you think is going to happen next? You know, maybe a new record finally gets released at the end of the year, maybe another big tour in the fall, maybe even just a new song or something of the new variety in general, you know, from the Cab to keep this train rolling. Well, I'm assuming you didn't guess complete radio silence for a whole year, but if you did, you would be correct. That's right, between summer of 2010 and summer of 2011, nothing happened in the world of the Cab, weirdly enough, at least nothing publicly. Well, a couple things did happen. The band parted ways with their record label. Both of their labels, Fueled by Ramen and Decadence, ties were severed. And their drummer left. No more Alex Johnson. Alright, totally not grim at all for the Cab, am I right? 2011 finds two guys named Alex with no record label, not having toured in a year, and 3 long years having passed since their first album. No biggie, totally fine. So what happened, right? How did we get here? What was going on in the world of the Cab? Well, one thing I was able to dig up was apparently there was an aborted second album which was being worked on while the band was still on Fueled by Ramen.
Whatever, the aborted sessions with Sam and Sluggo and Espionage and all that, and your quote was, it was sounding like an American Idol record, too forced and too random.
Mm-hmm.
How?
I mean, when you work with different producers, obviously each producer has their own style. So you go in and it was pretty much like the same voice over completely different tracks, you know what I mean? And it was sounding like some of the songs, one of the songs actually became a Big Time Rush song. You know what I mean? Like, that's not made up. You know, that there are Cab songs that became Big Time Rush songs, or there are Cab songs that are now on pop records that would have not have worked for us. Like the cool thing about
Can you name one?
I'm probably in trouble for this, but I could care less at this point. Till I Forget About You, which one of Big Time Rush's singles was going to be a Cab song, and yeah, I mean, it was so odd. We were in such a weird place. We were so happy because we were writing with all these huge writers and these huge producers, and we're like, oh my God, they wrote a hit for Kelly Clarkson. Like, well, they'll write a hit for us. You know what I mean? Like, well, it'll all work out. But it didn't sound like an album. We would have released it and fans would have been like, what is this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't the Cab. You know what I mean? This is Alex singing like these just pop songs. It just wouldn't make sense for the Cab. We like the minor, darker element and the groovy element to the Cab. And when all of that was taken away, it was like, what is special about this? And we said no, which a lot of people were like, are you crazy? A lot of our friends and bands were like, are you guys crazy? You're not going to release a song you wrote with so-and-so? And we're like, no, we're not. Like,
So by then you weren't doing the automatic pilot anymore. You now were
exactly, because we learned from Whisperwar and we're like, we're not going to do that again. It didn't work the first time necessarily. It's not going to work the second time, and this isn't us. And if we don't believe in it, how are we supposed to make other people believe in it? And that was kind of the point in time to where the label was like, well, if you don't want to do this, then you guys can leave if you want, or you can stay and release the songs that we like or do what we want you to do. And we were like, no, I'm sorry. We can't.
After these scrapped sessions for a second album and after a year of public inactivity, leaving their label and some self-doubt within the band, in the summer of 2011, the only two remaining members of the Cab who were there on the first album, singer Alex DeLeon and keyboard player Alex Marshall, got the band back together, only now it was the Cab 2.0, if you will.
Saints and sinners, soldiers, with the Cab from Las Vegas, Nevada.
They had a new lineup for the band, including a really cute-looking, scene-looking guy with a really cool name, Joey Thunder, on the bass, who had actually been playing with the band since that guy Cash left in summer of 2009, so he's been there for a bit now. Chantry Johnson on lead guitar and Dave Briggs on the drums. I gotta say, as I've been watching live footage of this era of the Cab around 2011, 2012 with the Cab 2.0 lineup with all the new dudes, super fucking talented musicians in the band. If there's one thing that makes up for such a big lineup change from album to album, it's that the new guys in the band were like serious fucking pros, like really, really good at their instruments. This band looked incredible to watch live, you know? The Cab 2.0 reappeared on a handful of tour dates on the Gimme Summer Ya Love tour in late summer 2011 alongside All Time Low, Mayday Parade, and We Are the In Crowd. They also announced that their new sophomore full-length album entitled Symphony Soldier would be self-released by the band on August 23rd of 2011. So, Symphony Soldier by the Cab. Let's get into it. A very interesting record indeed. Like I said, it was self-released by the band, no label, in 2011. Somehow they got the budget to work with mega pop rock producer John Feldman for this one. Some really, really, like, honestly insane co-writes on this album, too. Pete Wentz co-wrote a song, the song Grow Up and Be Kids. That one's not that weird, because, you know, they were on Pete's label, and they know him, and they toured together. Martin Johnson from Boys Like Girls co-wrote the song Bad. The two really crazy co-writes, Bruno Mars co-wrote the song Endlessly on this album, and Adam Levine from motherfucking Maroon 5 co-wrote the song Animal. This love is taking its toll on me, she said goodbye. So, musically speaking, the best way that I can succinctly try to sum up what's going on this record, the first thing I'll say, I think they actually did do a good job staying true, for the most part, to the original sound of the Cab. You know, they're still an R&B tinged pop rock band, just like they always were. I think Symphony Soldier is a good natural follow-up to their first record. There is progression, but I think it does still sound like the Cab at its core. The biggest change, however, the real big prominent change, is that they really cut out any and all of the 2008 like Fall Out Boy-esque emo / pop punk influence which their first album had. Any of that is all gone now. The Cab sound like straight up Maroon 5 Jr. here on 2011's Symphony Soldier. They sound like, you know, they could be a good opening act for Train or One Republic or something like that. And whether that's a good or bad thing is entirely up to you. What I like about Symphony Soldier, though, is that they really picked a lane and stuck with it on this album. You know, I think that was a good move on their part. The songs sound a lot more focused and refined and you know, generally more accessible than their first album. And I don't know, you know, to me, the mainstream, like Maroon 5, Bruno Mars kind of sound really just works for this band, in my opinion. The Cab does it really well, you know, so why not have them fully go for it on this record? You know, they did a good job.
Well, I think when you're releasing an album on Fueled by Ramen, you get classified, you know, in that whole pop punk scene, but I think naturally that's definitely not what we listen to. You know, we definitely listen to I listen to Justin Timberlake, you know, Stevie Wonder, and then we listen to a lot of stuff like The Script and Parachute and The Fray. You know, like we don't really listen to much pop punk. Not that we don't enjoy it or appreciate it. It's just it's not our style. You know what I mean?
We just have a lot of different influences, and with us together, we just create like a hybrid of music.
Yeah. I mean, with this new album, definitely getting farther away from that whole, you know, pop punk world musically. I think.
And I gotta say, the Cab, they're still horny as hell on this record. Maybe even hornier this time around. Sexy, sexy songs. That's why in the intro of this video I was like, hey, sex addicts, because, like, this is just straight up sex music, you know what I mean? I feel like it's, you know, the Cab is for it's for people who like to fuck, you know? Like, if you fuck a lot, Symphony Soldier is a great album for you. Anyways, the song Angel with the Shotgun is absolutely gigantic. It sounds like it was made to fill an arena. Temporary Bliss is probably my personal favorite song on the album. It's just a really powerful, super well-written, sexy pop rock song. One of the singles on the album, Bad, which was written with Martin Johnson, actually did achieve some radio play, believe it or not. There's a bunch of other, like, really great songs on this album. If you're into, like, horny R&B, like Maroon 5 style pop rock, I definitely recommend checking this album out. If you haven't, there's a good handful of songs on here that sound like they really could have been massive hits. The song Intoxicated or La La or even Endlessly. There's a lot of really great, just great pop music on this album. And Symphony Soldier actually got an overwhelmingly positive response from critics. Really good reviews. Alt Press gave it like a stellar review. Absolute Punk called it a masterpiece. It even debuted at number freaking 62 on the Billboard 200. So although, you know, in the grand scheme of things, much like their first record, this album, Symphony Soldier, definitely failed to blow up, you know, in a real mainstream sense, and it failed to, like, make the Cab actual big-time chart-topping pop rock stars like it seems like they were aiming to be. Regardless, even though it wasn't a mainstream splash, I do see this album as a big success in the sense that the Cab pulled themselves back together after essentially almost crashing and burning and, you know, after Whisper War. The fact that they self-released this album, put it together themselves on their own terms, and it ended up actually genuinely being a really great fucking record, even though it didn't make them superstars. The fact that this record is great and charted and had some radio play at all, and saved the Cab from, like, totally falling off and breaking up, that to me is a big fucking success, you know? I will say one thing about this record, and I think in making this video, I've kind of realized that I actually prefer this second The Cab album to the first one. I think maybe when I was younger, I preferred Whisper War because it's more like Fueled by Ramen-y, but I don't know, Symphony Soldier, I actually kind of prefer it musically, but when pondering the question, why didn't this record blow up? Because again, it's pretty clear that the Cab were like kind of shamelessly going for a radio hit. You know, they wanted to be like a really, really big band. You know, so why didn't Symphony Soldier by the Cab blow up? Well, I don't think that this album has the unique, distinct identity of its own, which is usually necessary for a band to blow up in the mainstream. They sound more like specifically the opening act for Maroon 5 as opposed to like being their own Maroon 5. Do you know what I mean? Or like their own The Cab, rather. Just for some context, you know, once again, coming from someone who knew about The Cab when this album came out and was, you know, a fan, and, you know, I remember this album releasing. I remember being kind of confused by this album at the time, really. At that point in 2011, I remember for me, it felt like a lot of time had passed since 2008 for some reason. That 3 years felt like a really long time, and culture shifted a lot, and there's just a lot of changes in music and just everything. So at that point in 2011, I honestly kind of thought of the Cab as like a kind of washed up, like C-tier 2008 Fueled by Ramen band at that point. I certainly did not think of them or look at them as potential mainstream pop rock superstars. It was kind of like, oh, that band's still around? Really? I thought of the Cab as being similar to the Somerset or We Are the In Crowd, you know, not as being similar to like Bruno Mars. So for fan perception, at least from my personal perspective at the time, it was kind of confusing, and I do think that this album is great for what it is, but I think it just wasn't like great enough or attention-grabbing enough or even unique enough, which it would have needed to be to cut through the noise and blow up in the mainstream world. I don't know. But I digress. I don't know. That's just my my little analysis there. But I do really like Symphony Soldier. I don't know. Anyways, we're getting to the end here, folks. The band did some pretty fucking crazy touring in support of Symphony Soldier. They were really trying to break into the mainstream pop world. Check this out. In late summer of 2011, like I said, Gimme Summer You Love tour. After that touring with All Time Low, in fall of 2011, they did some Canadian dates with Avril Lavigne on the Black Star tour. Pretty insane. Fall and winter of 2011, they went out on the Get Your Heart On tour, headlined by Simple Plan, with Forever the Sickest Kids and Mariana's Trench playing too. Fun fact, I went to this tour as well, and I went specifically to see Forever the Sickest Kids because, I don't know, I'm built different. Early 2012, they went out on the Everything's Fine Symphony Soldier, which was a co-headliner between the Cab and the Somerset, and the Somerset had a record out at the time which was called Everything's Fine, hence the name of the tour. Also on the tour were bands like He Is We, Days Difference, and Paradise Fears. Summer of 2012, they did a North American tour with a kind of a The Fray sounding band, or like an Augustana sounding band called Parachute. And in fall of 2012, guess what? Guess who they go on tour with? They do some world touring with the band Maroon 5 on their Overexposed tour. Craziness. All right, so I know this is starting to run a little long, so I'm going to try to wrap up the story of the Cab as quickly as I can. There's one little chunk of their career that we have left to cover, and believe it or not, this is actually, if you ask me, kind of the maybe the most mysterious and bizarre era for the Cab. So after the Symphony Soldier album and the touring on that album ceased in late 2012, guess what? There's another entire year, a little more than a year actually, of more radio silence from the Cab and no communicado with their audience. Now look, I think musicians have the right to take breaks whenever they damn well please, but if the Cab were trying to become some big mainstream successful band, or just retain their audience and their momentum, I don't think that these year-long periods of radio silence were helping. I think they were only hurting the cause. So 2013, it's Crickets from the Cab. They come back in early 2014 and announce that they had signed to major label Republic Records, which is pretty huge. And they also announced a new EP that would be coming out on April 29th of 2014, which is called Lock Me Up. And this EP was 5 songs, and it was kind of more of a sampler, actually, because they said that those 5 songs were actually going to also appear on a full-length record, which would come out later on in 2014. So it was kind of a sampler for an upcoming new full-length. So, exciting stuff, very cool. In an interview from around that time that Alex DeLeon did with Alternative Press magazine, he said that the long, silent break since Symphony Soldier was due to them taking the time to try to write the best songs possible and come up with the best stuff, and also due to taking time looking for a record label. In Alex DeLeon's words, while he was proud of the success they achieved on Symphony Soldier, quote, "We also realize that if you want to be the biggest band in the world, you need a major label." So in his own words, the Cab are trying to be the biggest band in the world here in 2014 on Republic Records with the Lock Me Up EP. So, in typical the Cab fashion, there's a little bit of turbulence already, because just 1 week before this Lock Me Up EP is slated for release in April, it was announced that the only other remaining original member of the Cab besides the singer, piano man Alex Marshall, decided he would be finally leaving the Cab. He put out a statement. He said that there were new doors opening for him career-wise, and he wanted to pursue these other endeavors. Now, just a quick little, just a quick little side note. In doing these YouTube videos here on the Cozy Representative YouTube channel for as long as I have now, one thing that I've kind of learned and realized, I mean, I think this is kind of like, maybe a lot of people do feel this way, but I this has really been driven home to me, is that when it comes to a band, like, the lineup matters, and lineup changes, like, at a certain point, when you're down to just the one original dude, or even just the 2 original dudes, or whatever, it's weird. It's weird. It's like a different band at that point. Obviously, it's different for every band, and every situation is different, but it matters, and it's important, and at a certain point, it's a little like, what's even going on here anymore? You know what I mean? It's just the one guy. Obviously, there were other dudes in the Cab still at this point who had been there now for a few years, but, I'm just saying, it's a little bit of a bummer that it's like nobody from the, it's like Panic at the Disco, right? Either way, full steam ahead. They release the Lock Me Up EP. As far as I can tell, the Cab. So this is where shit starts to unravel and become mysterious. As far as I can tell, the Cab only played 1 show during this era of the Lock Me Up EP in 2014 that I know of or can find, and it was April 25th in San Diego. They debuted some new songs. Why don't you lock me up? They played that show. The Lock Me Up EP comes out. Just a quick little analysis of this 5-song EP. It is by far the most major label, mainstream pop sounding music that the Cab had ever put out up until that point. They're doubling down on their Maroon 5 influence pop. And now on the title track, for example, there was even some kind of bluesy, like, Black Keys influenced sound going on in there, which is actually pretty cool. My personal favorite song on this EP is the song Numbers. It's like very, like, it could be by any mainstream pop artist in 2014. That song, it's like, the music on this, it's like faceless pop. It's kind of like what Alex DeLeon was saying he didn't want to do for their second record, that scrap second album, released just kind of like faceless pop music. Like, that's kind of what's going on here now on Lock Me Up, in my opinion. But for pop music, I think there's good stuff on here. Like I said, I really like the song Numbers. There's also some like extremely cornball music going on here, like the song Stand Up, I just can't really do, and I don't know. Yeah, it's all right. It's fine. But either way, you know, so they're, you know, the EP comes out, they're still trying to take over the world. Nothing else happened in the year of 2014. There was no third record by the Cab. There was no touring. Just actually back to radio silence from what I can find. And we go into 2015 and into 2016, and there's nothing happening from the Cab. No word from Republic Records. It wasn't until 2016. At that point, Alex De Leon had started his solo project called Bones. And he said in a podcast in 2016 that the Cab was officially done and it was part of his past now. And unfortunately, guys, I've searched far and wide on the internet. You know, I have no idea what happened in 2014 with their major label deal and with that upcoming third record. I don't have any exclusive tea on what went down to lead to the Cab breaking up in 2014 and not releasing their record on Republic Records. I'm not MTV behind the music. I don't have the scoop. And it's a mystery what the scoop is. It's unfortunate. And it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of a bummer and speaks to, I think, a lot of the problems that the band, the Cab, were having in their post-Whisper War era of trying to be this big pop band where there's just too much instability. They never really hit a stride, you know, between 2010 and 2014. You know, the Symphony Soldier album did well, but there's just too many scrapped albums going on, too many member changes, too many years of radio silence from the band. So anyway, that's pretty much where the Cab story ends for right now. One fun little tidbit, they've experienced kind of an unexpected resurgence in recent years because apparently the song Angel with a Shotgun, track 1 on Symphony Soldier, if you look on Spotify, I'm just going to pull up Spotify on my laptop real quick. Yeah, on Spotify, this song Angel with a Shotgun has 178 million plays, which is miles above, you know, any other Cab song. Those are like real mainstream hit level play numbers, you know. So it appears as though the song would have been a big hit back in the day, but it wasn't. It actually, this song went through the, what happens to a lot of songs now, where the internet blows it up years later. A couple other examples are that Paramore song, All I Wanted, or the Panic at the Disco track, House of Memories, you know, where TikTok blows it up. It becomes some trend on TikTok like years later. For this song, as far as I can tell, it became actually a Nightcore version. Somebody Nightcored it, which for those of you who don't know, and I don't really know what Nightcore is, but as far as I can tell, it's basically just where you speed up a song, and then you put it on the internet, and then people who are into Nightcore listen to it, and I don't know, I don't even really understand what it is besides speeding up a song, but apparently someone Nightcored Angel with a Shotgun by the Cab, and it like blew the fuck up, and it has 178 million plays now. And also another thing about the Cab and their streaming numbers, I don't even know how the hell this is explained, but if you go on their Spotify, their entire top 10 most played songs is all stuff from the Symphony Soldier record and also the Lock Me Up EP, which is really crazy, and they all have really big numbers, these two later releases by the Cab. The only thing in their top 10 that was from the first album is the song One of Those Nights, which is interesting because that wasn't even like one of the bigger singles from the album. They have 1.6 million monthly listeners, so that's wild. The Cab have not, to my knowledge, done any real reunion stuff, but I can say I do remember before the pandemic happened in 2019, Alex De Leon and Alex Marshall posted some stuff together on Instagram and were kind of teasing that there was another album coming out at some point, but then the pandemic happened and then that you know, it didn't seem like that was happening for a while, but now recently they've been posting stuff together again on Instagram and like making references to the Cab on Instagram. So maybe this year in 2023, who knows, we'll see a reunion of the Cab, or at least the two Alexes. Maybe we'll hear some new music or some old unreleased music. Maybe we'll see them live, or maybe in typical the Cab fashion, this will be another false start, another shelved record, and another missed opportunity to make the Cab the biggest band in the world. I'm going to cut it off there. Thank you guys for taking this journey with me. The Cab are a very interesting band, made some cool music. I really like the Cab's music. I think it's fun. You know, there's a lot to zero in on here as far as why they should have been bigger, why they weren't bigger. I do think they made a lot of mistakes, but at the end of the day, they always had very well written, well crafted pop music to back it up. And you know, yeah, I thought this video was going to be a easy video to make. I didn't think the story of the Cab would be that complicated, but I was wrong. Turns out the Cab are surprisingly one of the more nuanced and complicated bands in the 2008 Fueled by Ramen era or whatever. So thank you guys for watching. I love you. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. I have a Patreon if you want to support further. There's some bonus content on there and shit. There's a link in the description. I love you guys, and yeah, thank you for watching. Peace out. Have a good one.